Hey folks, this is Fernando doing another video for the More Survivalist. In this case, we're going to be taking a look at what is probably the best way of starting a fire during an emergency when you really need it, and that is matches. These are some of the options you have available in the market right now. Why matches? Why not something else? Well, as you probably know, if you look at some of these TV shows, Discovery Channel and such, that are somewhat related to survival and preparedness and whatnot, you will usually see that a fire is, the right way of starting a fire is supposed to be using a fire steel, using a knife, and striking a spark into some tinder, and that's how you're supposed to make fires. That works very, very well. The nice thing about that way of starting fires is that a fire steel is pretty reliable. It's just a chunk of metallic material, very resistant, especially when as thick as this one. It's going to be lasting for very long time. And yeah, it does work. Now, even though the big advantage is the simplicity and reliability of the system within the limitations of just creating sparks, you still need some kind of tinder. Cotton balls, natural tinder, making tinder yourself with a knife, but you still need dry material, a good amount of it, and then only striking a spark that will hopefully catch into your tinder, then only you will have actual flames. That can be done, sure, but it's not as simple as with a match. A match provides an instant flame to work with. All those things look very good, and it's a very reliable way of starting within those limitations. But during a disaster, during a real emergency, you may not have dry tinder with you. You may not have anything to create dry tinder with. You may not even have the dexterity in your fingers so as to do so as to strike a flame, so as to strike the steel, so as to create your bundle of kindle in the first place. All those things require the use of both hands, the dexterity you may not have, especially given that fire is what's going to be saving your life in extreme cold conditions where you're basically freezing to death. If you're freezing to death, there's a good chance that your fingers may not be working that well for you. Recently, there was this man that walked back home just a couple miles, but because of the extreme cold weather, he ended up losing all the toes in his feet that just froze. He lost all of them because of just a couple miles of walking with, of course, not the proper clothing. But, you know, it's no joke. Cold weather can be very, very serious. And the thing about a fire is that even though we usually talk a little bit about it when making reference to EDC setups and stuff like that, you know, always mentioning how good an idea is to actually have a lighter. I will usually have, at the very least, a lighter in my keychain and some other lighter hanging around there, this one or some other kind of lighter with me. But the problem is that even with lighters, they are more, you know, complex. They, you know, even a good one like this one, you still may end up losing the gas because of a leaky valve. You may end up having a Zippo or an IMCO type of lighter that may just run out of fuel, and the fuel dries up and it will not work. Sure, you could use the little spark in there so as to start a fire somehow, but we're going back to that far less than ideal way of doing so when you just cannot afford it because you've lost dexterity, you don't have a dry tinder, and you need a flame, you need a fire right now. For that, the best way of making sure you have a quick flame to start with is a match. And matches, you know, are still used for that because of how well they work. Now, in spite of that, not all matches are created equal. Some of them are more sensitive than others. And even if you, for example, using a common simple, let's start taking a look at some of these matches which are covering what's available in the market. A common kitchen match like this one. If you wet it, you put it in water, it may not work as well. You know, even if I manage to strike, you know, with a little bit of water, it's already hard for it to work. If you have one that it's like this one, just exposed to a little bit of humidity, just makes the head fall apart. You may have seen this happen when going, for example, in cabins or something like that, because even a normal match like this one, if you have a little bit of water, you put it in water, you dry it up quickly, and you may end up with a flame, you know? But that doesn't mean that it's going to be working in humid conditions, because with high humidity, this is what ends up happening with a match. The head just falls apart, like so. You see, the head just falls apart. And if you've been maybe in a cabin, in an old cabin, after, you know, a place that's not visited often and has a bit of humidity in it, maybe you went there. I mean, this has happened to me several times. You just go, you try it out, and the heads just fall apart because of the humidity. You try to start a wood burning stove, and you find out that the matches just fall apart. That's because these normal kitchen matches don't have much resistance to humidity. So moving on forward, you see that you have the more windproof, waterproof safety matches. Now these are very good choices within some of its limitations. It is windproof because you have a good amount of powder that's going to be burning, almost working like a little flare of some kind, and you see how it has a coating that reaches up to there. This coating makes the match far less sensitive to humidity, and it gives, of course, a little bit of water resistance. So even if you dunk it a little bit in water, if you dry it up fast, it wouldn't be a problem. Humidity, especially if kept in a good match case, especially, it's not going to be a problem. These are definitely more resistant to humidity thanks to that lacquer paint that you see. Now, as you notice, it only reaches this far. That means that all this piece of wood here is exposed, and water would penetrate with enough time, would penetrate through the wood and get to the burning material, the powder that you have in the head of the match. Moving on to some other, the problem I find here, especially with this kind of case, is that you have the striking surface is exposed to the outside, and it just does not work very well at all. I mean, even when brand new, it was very hard to get it to work. With a little bit of tumbling around in a pack, it's basically impossible to strike it that way, especially with this surface. If you keep another one on the inside, then you will have better luck. But you have to cut away a little bit of that and keep it there inside. And this one, the lid does not screw into place, just it's pressed. So it's not as if it has an O-ring like maybe these ones, or this other match case, which with an O-ring, you're pretty much ensuring water resistance. It's not going to be getting in. Now, in spite of being windproof and humidity waterproof to some degree, the weakness of this kind of match is that you need the strike surface. With a strike anywhere match, such as these two, you don't have that problem. So those would be the weaknesses that I find in this kind of match. Even though this is a kind of NATO issued match, and within those things it does work well. Let's take a look at how it compares to the UCO. The UCO match is like the steroid version of the windproof match. It has almost twice amount of burning material of powder here to go through, so it should be working nicely, at least for a few more seconds. Let's try burning these two at the same time, see how they go. Hope I don't burn myself doing this. So there we go. Both of them are already burning. This one is pretty tough. Even if you put it like in water, underwater, you get it out, it still keeps on burning. at least to some extent. Now the problem with this type of match is that you have that quick flare effect that it's not as practical. At least that's what I found out when using them. It's not as practical for when you need a slower burning flame that allows you to get closer to maybe a few twigs or a little bit of a smaller cut wood. With a slower burning flame, you just can get a little bit closer. This will burn out pretty fast. Even with a normal match, those were just a few seconds. You probably could see that there as you watch the video. But with a normal burning match, if you are careful so as to protect it, you have more time. And you can apply this closer to maybe a twig, maybe something else that needs burning. You can approach that and you will have a little bit more time. With that, it's more of a fast burning flare kind of effect. It works very well when you have a flammable material to throw the match into or to approach the match to, or when you have a good bundle of dry tinder. You just start it and put it in there. It's gonna be heating up that bundle of tinder nicely, very, very fast. So in those conditions, the windproof match makes sense. Yet at the same time, the windproof part of these matches is kind of debatable, because when you're starting a fire, and if you've done so a few times, you know this already well enough, you need a place to work with where you don't have drafts of wind so as to make things a little bit worse. You need a place where you don't have drafts blowing away the tinder that you're starting and such. And so from that point of view, you would already lit the match in a place where you don't have strong winds. So the part about being windproof, sure, it is true that this kind of match is windproof because no amount of wind is going to be blowing out and extinguishing it. Even a little bit of water, it will not do so. But it has a usefulness that is somewhat debatable. I find that the best options in terms of survival matches for worst case scenarios are strike anywhere matches. And strike anywhere matches, maybe one of the most famous ones are the blue diamond strike anywhere matches, the ones that have this white little head. If you have any rugged surface of any kind, cement floor, walls, even a rock, you can just strike it in there. It's actually very simple. With the striking surface, the actual strike anywhere surface of these matches is the white tip alone. So you have to be careful not to rip it off, because the red part is not strike anywhere, only the white one. And blue diamonds, they come in these bigger kitchen matches, and they come in smaller ones. I've tried both for quite some time. The smaller ones, in my opinion, just have too little of the strike anywhere material so as to be a good option. The bigger ones are better. You just have a rock, something like that. Besides that, the strike anywhere match, the bigger one, allows you for more error, because you have more room of error, because even if you strike it a couple times and it doesn't start, you still have more material to keep on trying until you are successful. So as I was saying before, I usually like having a slower burning flame so as to approach it, to maybe, even if I don't have a good amount of tinder, even if I have just a few little twigs or pine leaves to work with, this is gonna be easier to approach it there and have the actual flame heating and burning into that. In some cases, of course, you just can do well enough with a normal windproof match. But the favorite match, and my best recommendation, is the Swan Vesta. The Swan Vesta is my favorite match. It has several things going for it. First of all, it's a strike anywhere match. That's a huge thumbs up in my opinion. Not to have to worry about another component in the system, another thing to worry about humidity, another thing that could get lost, another thing that could go wrong when trying to start the match. With a strike anywhere match, a rock, anything that you find around the floor, the walls, you will strike it and it will go. And the Swan Vesta has the entire head being made of this strike anywhere material. It's not only a little tip that you have. Now the problem here is that to some extent these are officially not waterproof, and they are a little bit more susceptible to humidity because they don't have that that finish, that paint going on protecting it. Now there's several ways. People sometimes use fingernail paint, you know, that kind of thing. I like the idea of using paraffin. Paraffin, you know, just with a candle, you just approach it to where you have melted paraffin, you dip the head, and that's going to be giving it a little bit of protection on its own. I just spread there a little bit. This is going to be making it a little bit more waterproof. The best way of doing that is not just how I just did it, but to actually melt the paraffin, you know, a good amount of it, like, you know, this big candle, putting it on a burner, melting it all, and dipping the entire match in it. If you dip the entire match in it, then pull it out with a plier, like these pliers, you just pull it out and you leave it to dry. You're going to be covering the entire match, so it's going to be giving it more protection where you have the wood. It's less likely that water is going to be penetrating through the wood and getting to the actual match. You know, all this sounds very specific and such, but this is what I've seen during many years of fooling around with matches, trying these things out and seeing what works and what really doesn't work that well. And I can tell you that a match that has been dipped in paraffin like that, it's gonna be very water resistant. It's gonna be, maybe it's the most water resistant option I've come across so far. If you have something better, if you know some better trick, just let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Leave it in the comment section. So these having those advantages, strike anywhere, you can make it waterproof just using that technique I was explaining before. And the size also is something to consider. A bigger match, like the bigger blue diamond ones, you know, they have a bit more of a length, and sometimes, like with these UCO matches, they are kind of too big, maybe to a point. You know, these ones only fit in certain kind of match boxes, like this one. You know, this is pretty big, but if I try putting it in a smaller one, it will not fit in this one. I've tried. It will not fit in this one. Definitely not, because it has a much smaller compartment, and it will not fit in a typical marble matchbox either. So that is a little bit of a restriction of its own. So I do like these. I think they are great, especially when you want something that it's very windproof. When wind is an important factor for you, for whatever reason, this is the one that gives you the most burning time. And yeah, I mean, it does work pretty well for that. But for a normal use, emergency or survival type of match, this would be what I would go for, the Swan Vesta. It strikes nicely, it starts very easily, and with a bit of wax or paraffin, it increases the burning time. You see right now, it's using the paraffin from the coating intended for waterproofing. It's extending the burning time as well. So keeping your hands close to it, you can move it around a little bit and have a nice amount of burn time as well. You have to be careful because the paraffin melts and it starts spreading, but you can even use it almost as a fire starter, at least for a small bit. But these are definitely the ones that I like the most, the Swan Vestas. Now, a word about cases, because that's an important part of how well all this works or not. If the match is wet, no matter what it is that you do, there's a good chance it will not be working when you need it. Even with a small drop of water leaking into this, it's going to be creating enough humidity so as to ruin the head. And when you try to start it, you just end up ripping it off like you've seen here. So this is the little case that comes with these NATO kind of matches. Good stuff, but the case not good. You will need a striker on the inside, and you don't have an O-ring, and it doesn't screw into place. I don't like it. The classic marble type of match case. This is a Chinese copy, and at least this one is very poor. It just does not lock tightly into place. It skips the threads, and it's a little bit gimmicky to an extent as well. You see how you have to rotate it like that. I have a little bit of cotton there so as to avoid the heads from hitting one another, and then you have to screw it down into place. I suppose that in theory, if the match case is done properly, it would work. You also have some striking surface here, but at least this one is really not good. I think that as of right now, the best options you have are good plastic or metal cases with a good O-ring. Those are definitely the best ones. I was a little bit disappointed on this one. This is the UCO case that comes with these large waterproof and windproof matches. And well, first of all, you have the striking surface on the outside. It comes with a spare one, which is a nice thing to see, because it actually comes with two spare ones, because they already understand, of course, there's a good chance of this getting wet, and if it gets wet, it doesn't work. Remember, the weakness that the Strike Anywhere match does not have. But I like this case a lot. I thought it was actually pretty great, but then I realized that just being in a few trips in my backpack, it cracked. There's a little crack there. You see that crack? I'm not so pleased with it anymore. That's just not acceptable. You know, with a match case of this size, it should be bomb proof. It should be indestructible. And clearly it isn't, because this means that water could leak inside, ruin all the matches I have there. You see how the devil is indeed in these little details. You would have thought that this is an excellent choice. I thought it was until not so long ago. But obviously the plastic used is more brittle than you would think. As of right now, the ones that I like the most are these two. This is something that I found out recently, found it in eBay actually, and it's a whistle, which is nice to have always, and it is a match case as well. Limitation, not many of them fit in there. You actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Strike Anywhere Swan Vesta matches in there. Good enough for an emergency, sure. Good enough for medium or long-term emergency, not so much. At least you would have some, which is better than not having any of them at all. And at least they are kept safe, because it is aluminum, very solid, and you have an O-ring there for keeping it watertight. I think this is a pretty neat option as a keychain. I actually like these a lot. I have a couple of them floating around. Maybe my favorite one is this one. Ordinary. It doesn't seem to have any brand at all, but it's a typical plastic match case that you can sometimes find online. It doesn't have any specific names, at least none that I found. Has a little piece of ferrocium for striking a spark. This isn't very useful, very small. At least you have it there, but what I like it is as a case. It also has a small mirror there on the inside. not very good for much, but you do have one there, and it has a very nicely made O-ring. It's not actually an O-ring, it's like a plastic seal, a rubber seal, which is very sturdy, works very well. Threads lock nicely into place. This is tough. This is solid. I've had this one maybe the longest of them all, and it's clearly holding on very well. Fits a good number of matches in there. You have different types of matches, and you can get about, I tried just different ones, and you can fit about 20 different matches in there. as long as they're not too big. So these ones would not work in there. I just try these and they just don't fit. Just for a small amount of space, they're just too long. I could cut them down a little bit, but no, I don't see the point in it. As you see, I have different options. I have a few of the Strike Anywhere Blue Diamond ones, bigger ones. I have a few of the flame of the Windproof matches in case that's what I'm needing. And I have a good chunk, a good amount of my favorite ones, the Swan Vestas in there. And I see a small bit of a fishing line and a hook in there. So yeah, that's a good combination so as to start a fire. Finally, the thing that maybe gets used the most when you need a fire quick right there in the moment is a fire starter of some kind, because the match is just the first place. The match gives you a flame to start a fire, but lighting a match doesn't mean you have a fire going. For that, you're going to be needing maybe something else, and if you cannot improvise it, in general it's better if you have a fire starter of some kind. Like these are very classic, available anywhere fire starters for barbecues, that sort of thing. I've used similar to these ones for a good amount of time. Maybe it's the stuff that I've been using the most. It works okay, no complaints. Maybe not the best option. I don't like this kind of match head here, because lighting it like a match, it doesn't work that way. But I suppose that you have something that you could use in case you don't have an actual match. You could strike one of these, cut one of these off, and yeah, this block, for example, is gonna be burning for a good at least 10-15 minutes for sure, maybe even 20 minutes. But my favorite choice of fire starter is Hamado paper. Hamado paper, made in Sweden. These guys make the best stuff. The Hamado paper is, in my experience, maybe the most handy, most practical fire starter you have. First of all, I love how compact it is. Fits anywhere. Any small kit you have, you can fit a little bit of Hamado paper. It burns for an acceptable amount of time. I've actually done videos showing how long it burns. It catches a flame for a fire steel very, very well, very nicely. You just rip it off a little bit like that, so as to expose a little bit more of fiber. And with a fire steel, you just get going very fast. And finally, if you just need a fire quick, you have a little bit of twigs and small branches, and all you need is 5-10 minutes of fire so as to get that going. This amount of Hamado paper will get going, and it starts very easily. It's simply a matter of approaching a flame for a few seconds, and you get going, no problem whatsoever. You just use your match, you approach the Hamado, and just like that, very quickly, it starts burning. The Hamado paper is mostly, paper fiber and beeswax. Because of the smell, it's pretty much beeswax. That's what it is, and it's so simple, so easy to work with. It's not messy, and it just burns well. A small amount of it like that. I'm not going to be wasting your time 10 minutes showing you how long it burns, but it does work very, very well. So keep that in mind. Hamado paper for whenever you need a fire starter for quickly starting a fire during an emergency. It's great stuff to have in your kits. Guys, that's been an overall suggestion of what you need and what you should have and consider for your fire starting needs, and what you would be integrating to your kits that actually works, and not make mistakes that during a worst case scenario, when you never need a match, but when you need it, you're gonna be needing it bad. So make sure it actually works. Guys, take care. Thumbs up if you like the video. Take care. See you on the next video.